go like that. Hi, I'm Sunshiny Star, your hostess tonight for the Spooky Story Sundays of the Seaside Shadows Haunted History Tours, episode 17, I believe. Tonight I'm here by the banks of the Mystic River, which is a tidal river and which is also brackish. Now, tidal means that this river behind me is controlled by the moon and the tides of the ocean. Brackish means that it is a saltwater river. In fact, brackish means mixed with saltwater and fresh. And in the river behind me, we have very many sea creatures. We have squid, we have jellyfish, we have flounder, we have oysters, and we also have striped bass, which is a somewhat freshwater fish. So I don't want you to be frightened tonight if you happen to hear one of our very large striped bass jump behind me, or perhaps the sea serpent that I'm about to describe might bring its head above the water and look down upon us this evening. But in fact, this is not the area that I'm going to speak of tonight, although we do have a lot of history and lore about creatures from the deep, cryptids and such being in this river and frightening this town whenever is possible. Tonight we're going to be speaking of an area of Connecticut near Stratford and the Long Island Sound near the Stratford Lighthouse. Tonight we're going to be speaking about monsters of the deep. It is said that we know more about outer space than we know about our very own oceans. Sometimes creatures from the deep make their way into the Long Island Sound. And sometimes these creatures are unexpected and frightening. And this is what I'm going to tell you about tonight, beginning with the tale of a sea serpent. A sea serpent that has made itself known between the time frame of 1878 and 1925, not just to sea captains, not just to fishermen, but also to bathers that were there on the beach watching this strange creature. The last time this creature was sighted was 1925 by the bathers on the beach. During this time, the newspapers were just beginning to become popular. And sometimes I think that some of these stories may have been elaborated. But then again, the first-hand accounts of these gentlemen that encountered such creatures, these gentlemen have such character that they would never, ever be caught in a lie. So let's begin with a story about Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly was an assistant engineer on a steamship, and he was known to be sober and of sound mind. Mr. Kelly one morning was simply staring out at the water, chugging along on his steamship, when he noticed something rise out of the deep and stare down at him with a wide open mouth, with white whiskers and green scaly skin. The creature looked at him and, as if to taunt him, began to dive deep into the water, where coils of this serpent were so large that he said that you could have driven a team of oxen between the coils. The width of the serpent, he claimed, was the size of a horse. This creature was sighted by many other people after that. Sometimes the sea captains would shoot at the creature. Of course, for our dear Mr. Kelly, he was the only person who saw this animal. By the time he caught his breath and was able to make a sound, the creature had disappeared. He, pale white and afraid, told his captain what he had seen. The captain had also been familiar with such stories and did not doubt him in the least. because this man was so very trustworthy. So if you happen to be swimming in the Long Island Sound around Stratford, and maybe in the early mornings or in the evening by yourself, and you happen to feel as if a creature is staring down at you, I bid you, please do not look up. Simply swim as fast as you can to the shore and run home and put the covers over your head. Because this creature is not to be meddled with. The next story that I have to share with you concerns a giant octopus. Something in my mind that I think might be considered a kraken, if you will. I feel as if this is what these gentlemen encountered in 1895. In fact, the account on July 18th, 1895, is a first-person narrative of one Captain Obadiah Donaldson, whose crew was said to have fought off a 60-foot wide octopus with 100-foot long arms. The battle with this monster happened as his vessel awakened the sleeping beast. And upon awakening, this beast was very, very angry. The account says that approximately 5 miles off of the Stratford lighthouse, the captain was chugging along in his steamship when he came upon a big black floating mass in the water, just floating. The captain was seeing a 60-foot wide octopus. Upon seeing this, he says, "I want none of this on mine," and he changes course. However, he cannot change course quickly enough, and his ship collides with this creature. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm often cranky upon awakening. And so it is with this octopus. The octopus wakens and begins to lunge at the ship and begins to hurl its tendrils at the ship and at the men, curling one of its tendrils around the windlass. A very quick thinking mate on the ship begins to wind the windlass, and around it winds the 100-foot tendril of this octopus, breaking it from the creature and keeping it upon the ship. This only angers the creature even more. And the creature begins to pull as fast as it can, as hard as it can, the boat towards its eager mouth, or to squeeze it to death. A very quick thinking boatswain takes a meat chopper and chops any of the tendrils that are still holding the boat, and the creature retreats. The creature retreats only long enough to begin to unwind itself into a curling spring upon the ship, in which 3 porpoises intervene. It is very often that porpoises come to the aid of man. And in this case, these very brave porpoises gave their lives to help these gentlemen. The head porpoise in this group of 3 scouts is grabbed up by the octopus and squeezed to death. The gentleman on the ship can hear the bones of this porpoise breaking. The other 2 porpoises head off back to a reef where they return. They return with all of their friends and begin the most insane attack upon this octopus that these gentlemen have ever witnessed at their many years at sea. It is said that there was blood a mile wide upon the ocean that day. It is said that the porpoises attacked and attacked with their teeth gnashing, and the octopus fighting and throwing them with their 7 arms as much as possible, until finally, at the end of it, the porpoises had won. There were only pieces of this octopus floating upon the Long Island Sound. Among them were very many dead, brave porpoises who decided to come to the aid of this ship. Now, this is a tall tale, a fish tale, a crazy tale. And maybe it didn't happen at all, except I can tell you that when the captain arrived in port, in Bridgeport, he still had one of the octopus's arms aboard his ship. Upon unwinding it and laying it on the dock, it resembled a fire hose and was indeed 100 feet long. So I believe that this tale to be true, and I believe that a creature of the deep just happened to find itself in the Long Island Sound, lost, afraid, and alone. And upon being awakened from its sleep, decided to wreak havoc upon the people that awakened him. So if you happen to find yourself with a sleeping octopus, I would say, don't poke it, or you might find yourself very, very afraid. Now, the very last tale that I have to tell you involves mermaids. Mermaids have been creatures of mystery and lore since the beginning of time. In Germany, they are said to live along the River Rhine, luring sailors to their doom with their sweet siren songs. Here in Connecticut, we do have a tale of mermaids. Now, these mermaids may not be the beautiful mermaids that you're thinking of. They may not be exactly as we think of the little mermaid singing and gathering her shiny objects. In fact, in these very cold New England waters, what would you expect other than exactly a fish? And if this creature is half female and half fish, they will need to survive in these waters. And to do that, they must have very sharp teeth and be able to survive in these waters with very scaly skin. I'm about to tell you the tale of a lighthouse keeper who was the Stratford lighthouse keeper on July 4th, 1915. This was his post for over 40 years, and he was always on the lookout for mermaids because P.T. Barnum at that time had put out a call that if anyone could deliver to him a live mermaid, they would receive $20,000. Well, our dear friend Thene Judson was a little bit late on that. 2 decades late, to be exact. It is said on July 4th, 1915, he was staring at the sea as usual, looking out at his post, from his post, watching the creatures of the ocean swim and play and frolic when he noticed what he calls only a school of mermaids. At least 15 of them. Their blonde hair shining in the sun, their green and azure scales shining and glittering as they jump jubilantly out of the water and back down into the water very deeply. He was very excited to see this. Of course, we had no smartphones, we had no camera. He was just so excited. And he became even more excited when he noticed a very tiny mermaid sitting on the rocks at his very post, combing her hair out with a hairbrush to dry it in the sun. This mermaid, as he describes it, was about 75 pounds and only about 3 feet tall. He remarked about her beauty to the newspapers. He remarked about her beautiful long hair, her gazelle-like eyes, and her beautiful, white, sharp teeth. Jedson decided he was going to capture her anyway, regardless of the reward. How exciting is this? So he crept up very carefully, very slowly behind her, and grabbed her around the waist and held her only for a moment as she turned and hissed at him. This was the only noise that she made. He held her only for a moment, looking into her eyes, before she slipped away, as slippery as an eel, into the water below, leaving only the hairbrush behind. Now, this is again a tall tale, a fish tale, literally. And when he told this story to the press, his wife vouched for him. His wife produced the hairbrush that the mermaid had been using to comb her hair. The hairbrush was indeed very old and had oysters and barnacles attached to it. It is the belief of this couple that the mermaids would often ransack ships that had been sunken for their treasures and their shiny objects, which is very similar to our Little Mermaid story, right? So, whether you believe any of these stories at all is up to you. However, if you find yourself down by the Stratford lighthouse and you find yourself staring out at the sea, I can only hope and pray that the stories that I've told you this evening may impress themselves upon your heart, upon your mind, and upon your soul, that you may be lucky enough to see one of these creatures. Happy hauntings. Enjoy your night. This is Sunshine signing off from the very dark, very murky Mystic Riverbank.